What happens when the very system you've dedicated your life to turns against you? Judge Elena Carter, a woman who upheld the law with integrity and fairness for years, suddenly found herself on the other side of that system, accused, scrutinized, and humiliated. Imagine this. A routine drive home turns into a nightmare. Flashing red and blue lights, baseless accusations, and the sting of racial bias. For a moment, it didn't matter that Elena was a judge, a respected figure in her community. In that instant, she was seen as nothing more than a black woman in a nice car, a target for a system she had once trusted. Her fight wasn't just about clearing her name, it was about challenging a deeply flawed system, a system many are too afraid to confront. The stakes? Everything. Before we dive into this gripping story of courage, resilience, and systemic injustice, comment below where you're watching from today. And if this story captivates you as much as it did us, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring content. The city buzzed with the hum of activity as dusk fell over the streets. It was a Friday evening, and Judge Elena Carter was finally heading home after another grueling day in court. Known for her intellect and steadfast commitment to justice, Elena had spent years cultivating a reputation as one of the most respected legal minds in the city. Yet on this particular evening, her thoughts were far from the courtroom. The prospect of seeing her daughter Lily again filled Elena's heart with warmth. Lily had just returned home after her first year of college, and they'd planned a weekend full of family bonding, long conversations, shared laughter, and a brief escape from the stresses of their busy lives. As she drove her black luxury sedan through the quiet suburban streets leading to her neighborhood, Elena was momentarily lost in thoughts of what Lily might have to share about her college experiences. But her musings were abruptly interrupted. Her rearview mirror lit up with the glaring red and blue lights of a police car. Her heart sank, a knot tightening in her stomach. Instinctively, Elena ran through a mental checklist. Seatbelt, fastened. Speed limit, followed. Stops, completed every sign. She was confident she'd done nothing wrong. But she knew better than most that being confident in her innocence didn't guarantee her safety. Not when the officer pulling her over saw her first and foremost as a black woman. Taking a deep breath, Elena slowed her car and pulled over to the side of the road, her fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. Through her side mirror, she caught sight of the approaching officer. He was young, with a cocky stride, his hand resting almost lazily on the holstered gun at his hip. As he reached her window, she rolled it down, keeping her expression composed. "Evening, officer," she said in a calm, steady voice. "Is there a problem?" The officer's name tag read Officer D. McLeod. He didn't respond immediately, instead sizing her up with a long, scrutinizing look. "License and registration," he demanded coldly. Elena complied without hesitation, handing over her documents. As McLeod scanned her license, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. His eyebrows arched slightly. "Judge Carter," he said, his tone softening just slightly. Elena remained calm, meeting his gaze evenly. "Yes, that's me. Was there a reason for this stop, Officer McLeod?" His lips curled into a faint, almost smug smirk. "You were speeding and didn't make a full stop back at the intersection," he said, his voice carrying an air of authority. Elena frowned. She knew she hadn't been speeding and had stopped fully at the intersection, as she always did. But arguing wouldn't get her anywhere. Not here, not now. She'd seen this type of scenario play out far too many times in courtrooms. "I see," she replied evenly. "I must have been distracted." McLeod's expression didn't shift, but there was a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. It was clear he enjoyed the power he wielded in that moment. After a brief pause, he made his next move. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered abruptly. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She hesitated, her voice betraying the rising tension she felt. "Is that necessary, officer?" "Step out of the vehicle, now," he repeated, his tone more forceful. Resigned, Elena unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out into the cool night air. She stood by the hood of her car, watching as McLeod began to search her vehicle. He opened compartments, checked under seats, and even inspected the trunk. The knot in Elena's stomach tightened. Was this really about a supposed traffic violation, or was it about something more? The minutes dragged on as McLeod's search yielded nothing. Finally, he straightened and returned to her side, handing back her license and registration. "You're free to go," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Elena's composure didn't falter, but her voice carried an edge of indignation as she asked, "Is that all, Officer McLeod?" He hesitated before mumbling, "That's all," and turning back to his cruiser. Elena climbed back into her car, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. The encounter was over, but the anger simmering beneath her calm exterior remained. As she drove away, her thoughts raced. This wasn't just about her. This was a stark reminder of the systemic racism she'd spent her entire career fighting against. She thought she was immune, her title, her reputation, her accomplishments. But tonight, it was clear. None of that mattered to someone like Officer McLeod. This wasn't over. The drive home felt longer than usual. The quiet suburban streets that had once been comforting now seemed oppressively silent. Judge Elena Carter couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that lingered after her encounter with Officer McLeod. By the time she pulled into her driveway, the events of the evening replayed in her mind on an endless loop. McLeod's dismissive tone, the unwarranted search, the way he seemed to relish the small power he had over her. She turned off the engine and sat in her car for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. This was the same system she had worked within for years, believing in its potential for fairness and justice. Tonight, it felt like a betrayal. Inside, the warm light of her home welcomed her. Her daughter, Lily, was curled up on the couch, her laptop open in front of her. The sight of Lily brought a brief smile to Elena's face, but the weight of the night hung heavy on her shoulders. "Hey, Mom," Lily called out, closing her laptop. "How was your day?" Elena hesitated, unsure of how much to share. She didn't want to burden her daughter, but Lily was perceptive. The concern in her eyes was immediate. "Mom? What's wrong?" Elena sighed and sat down beside her. Something happened on the way home. She recounted the encounter with McLeod, keeping her tone as calm as possible. As she spoke, Lily's expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief and then anger. "That's outrageous," Lily exclaimed, her voice rising. "You didn't do anything wrong, and he just, what? Decided to harass you because he could?" Elena nodded slowly. "That's exactly what it felt like." Lily's hands clenched into fists. "This isn't fair, Mom. You're a judge. If they're doing this to you, imagine what they're doing to people who don't have your influence or resources." Elena's heart ached at her daughter's words. Lily was right. This wasn't just about her. It was about every black man and woman who had been subjected to unfair treatment by law enforcement. "I know," Elena said quietly, "and that's why I can't let this go." Lily leaned closer, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "What are you going to do?" For a moment, Elena didn't respond. She had spent her entire career advocating for justice within the courtroom, believing that change could be achieved through the system. But tonight had shown her that the system was far from perfect. "I'm going to fight back," Elena said finally. "Not just for me, but for everyone who's been treated like this." The next morning, Elena sat at her kitchen table with a steaming cup of coffee and a blank notebook in front of her. Writing has always helped her process her thoughts, and today there is a lot to process. She began jotting down everything she could remember about the traffic stop, the precise location, the time, McLeod's exact words and actions. She knew that every detail would be important if she decided to take legal action. By mid-morning, she had compiled several pages of notes. But Elena also knew she couldn't do this alone. She needed someone who understood the complexities of cases like these. Someone who could help her navigate the legal and public relations aspects of the fight she was about to undertake. She picked up her phone and dialed Marcus Evans, a prominent civil rights attorney and an old friend. They had worked together on cases in the past, and Elena trusted his expertise. "Marcus, it's Elena," she said when he answered. "Elena, it's been a while," Marcus replied warmly. "What's going on?" Elena hesitated for only a moment before launching into the story of what had happened the previous night. She detailed every moment, her voice steady but laced with underlying frustration. When she finished, there was a pause on the other end of the line. "Elena," Marcus said slowly, "this isn't just a traffic stop. This is racial profiling, plain and simple." "I know," Elena said, "and I need your help. I want to file a formal complaint against Officer McLeod." Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm with you. Let's do this the right way, though. We'll file the complaint, but I also think we should prepare for this to go public. Cases like this have a way of attracting attention. Elena hadn't considered the possibility of public scrutiny, but she nodded to herself. If that's what it takes to shine a light on this issue, then so be it. Over the next few days, Elena and Marcus worked together to draft the formal complaint. They outlined McLeod's actions in detail, citing every instance of misconduct. Marcus also suggested gathering additional evidence to strengthen their case, including dashcam footage from the police car. As they worked, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. For years, she had advocated for justice from the bench, ensuring fairness in every case she presided over. Now, she was taking that fight to a different arena. But the process wasn't without its challenges. Filing a complaint against a police officer was a daunting task, even for someone with Elena's credentials. She knew there would be backlash, both from the police department and the public. One evening, as Elena reviewed the final draft of the complaint, Lily entered the kitchen. "How's it going?" Lily asked, sitting across from her mother. "It's coming together," Elena replied. "But I won't lie, it's a little overwhelming." Lily reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. "You're doing the right thing, Mom, and I'm here for you no matter what." Elena smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you know." The day the complaint was filed, Elena felt a mix of emotions: relief, determination, and a twinge of apprehension. Marcus had been right. The case was likely to attract attention, and Elena needed to be prepared for whatever came next. As she left the courthouse, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Marcus. Elena opened the email and read Marcus's message carefully. He had outlined their plan going forward, including reaching out to local media outlets to ensure the story was told accurately. "Elena," the email concluded, "this is just the beginning. Stay strong." Elena took a deep breath and looked up at the courthouse steps, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. This was no longer just about her experience. It was about challenging a system that had allowed these injustices to persist for far too long. As she walked to her car, Elena felt a spark of determination reignite within her. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she was ready for the fight. Elena Carter had always been a private person. Her work as a judge often placed her in the public eye, but she maintained a careful balance between her professional and personal life. Now that line was about to blur in a way she had never anticipated. Filing the complaint against Officer McLeod was one thing. Taking it public was another entirely. A week after submitting the formal complaint, Marcus called with news she had expected, but still wasn't fully prepared for. "Elena," Marcus began, his tone cautious, "the media has picked up on the story." Elena closed her eyes briefly, bracing herself. "What are they saying?" "It's mostly factual at this point," Marcus said. "Local outlets are reporting that a prominent judge has filed a complaint against an officer for misconduct. But you know how these things go, it won't stay neutral for long." Elena sighed. She had spent her entire career upholding the law, but now she found herself on the other side of a deeply flawed system. "What do you think we should do?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "We need to get ahead of the narrative. If we don't tell our story in our own words, someone else will twist it. I've already had a few reporters reach out asking for interviews." The thought of sitting down in front of a camera and recounting the humiliating experience made Elena's stomach churn. But she knew Marcus was right. "Set it up," she said finally. "Let's do this." The interview was scheduled for the following week. The reporter, Naomi Fields, was someone Marcus had carefully vetted. She had a reputation for thoughtful journalism and a knack for asking tough but fair questions. On the day of the interview, Elena sat in her living room, nervously rehearsing her responses. Lily sat nearby, offering moral support. "You've got this, Mom," Lily said, her voice steady. "Just be yourself. Tell them what happened and why it matters." Elena smiled at her daughter, grateful for her unwavering encouragement. "Thanks, sweetheart. I'll do my best." When the time came, Elena and Marcus met Naomi in a sleek downtown studio. The bright lights and cameras were intimidating, but Elena squared her shoulders and reminded herself why she was there. The interview began with pleasantries. Naomi asking about Elena's background and her journey to becoming a judge. Elena answered confidently, speaking about her dedication to justice and the importance of fairness in the legal system. Then, the questions shifted to the incident with McLeod. "Judge Carter," Naomi said, her tone professional but empathetic, "you filed a formal complaint against Officer Daniel McLeod, accusing him of misconduct during a routine traffic stop. Could you walk us through what happened that night?" Elena took a deep breath, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She recounted the events with precision, detailing how McLeod had stopped her without cause, his condescending tone, and the unwarranted search of her car. "Do you believe his actions were motivated by racial bias?" Naomi asked. Elena's gaze didn't waver. "I do. As a judge, I've seen enough cases to recognize the patterns of racial profiling. That night, I wasn't treated like someone who had committed a minor traffic violation. I was treated like a suspect, and the only reason for that, in my view, was the color of my skin." Naomi nodded, leaning forward slightly. "What do you hope to achieve with this complaint?" "I want accountability," Elena said firmly. "Not just for Officer McLeod, but for the system that allows this behavior to go unchecked. Police officers have immense power, and with that power comes responsibility. If we don't hold them to the highest standards, we are complicit in perpetuating injustice." The interview aired the next morning, and the response was immediate. Social media lit up with reactions, and hashtags supporting Elena began trending, while others accused her of exaggerating the situation. Elena tried to focus on the positive comments, but the negativity was hard to ignore. "She's just playing the race card," one comment read. Another overreaction from someone who should know better. "Typical," another wrote. "She's a judge. She should respect the police, not drag them through the mud." But amidst the vitriol, there was also an outpouring of support. Messages flooded in from people across the country, some sharing their own experiences with racial profiling, others thanking Elena for speaking out. One message in particular stood out. It was from a young woman named Brianna, who wrote, "Judge Carter, I just wanted to say thank you. I've been stopped by the police for no reason so many times, but I never had the courage to speak up. You're doing something so important, not just for yourself, but for all of us. Please don't give up." Reading Brianna's words brought tears to Elena's eyes. This was why she had to keep going. The days that followed were a whirlwind. News outlets continued to cover the story, and it quickly became a topic of national debate. One evening, as Elena reviewed case files in her study, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Marcus. Elena opened the email and scanned the contents. The Internal Affairs Division had scheduled a hearing to review her complaint. The hearing date was set for the following week, and Marcus had attached a detailed plan for how they would present their case. Elena exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and apprehension washing over her. This was the next step in her fight for justice, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. The police department had already issued a statement defending McLeod, claiming that his actions were in line with departmental policy. The union representing the officers had also weighed in, accusing Elena of undermining law enforcement. As she closed her laptop, Elena's thoughts turned to the hearing. This was her chance to confront the system that had allowed McLeod's behavior, and she intended to make every second count. Later that night, Elena sat in her living room with a cup of tea in hand. Lily joined her, curling up on the couch with a blanket. "How are you feeling about the hearing?" Lily asked, her voice gentle. "I'm nervous," Elena admitted, "but I'm also ready." "This isn't just about me, Lily. It's about something much bigger." Lily nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I'm proud of you, Mom, not just for fighting back, but for doing it the right way." Elena smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything to me." As the two of them sat together in the quiet of their home, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but she wasn't alone. The public was watching, the system was listening, and Elena Carter was ready to make her voice heard. The day of the hearing arrived with a heavy sense of anticipation. Elena Carter stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing the lapels of her blazer. She had worn this suit countless times in court, but today it felt different. Today, she wasn't the one presiding over a case. She was the one seeking justice. Downstairs, her daughter Lily paced the kitchen, glancing anxiously at the clock. She had been Elena's unwavering support through the ordeal. But now, as the moment loomed, she couldn't hide her worry. "Mom," Lily said as Elena entered the room. "Are you sure you're ready for this? You know how these things go." Elena placed a reassuring hand on Lily's shoulder. "I know exactly how they go, sweetheart. That's why I have to do this. Officer McLeod and others like him count on the system to protect them. But I won't let that happen this time, not without a fight." Lily nodded, though the concern in her eyes remained. "I just don't want to see them try to tear you down." "You don't deserve that." Elena smiled, pulling her daughter into a quick embrace. "I'll be okay, Lily. I've faced tougher battles than this, and no matter what happens, I'm doing what's right." The drive to the Internal Affairs office was tense. Marcus Evans sat behind the wheel, his typically calm demeanor tinged with an edge of seriousness. "Elena," he said as they pulled into the parking lot, "we're ready. I've gone through the evidence a dozen times. The dashcam footage speaks for itself, and your testimony is solid. But remember, this is internal affairs. They're not exactly known for impartiality." Elena nodded, adjusting the cuffs of her blazer. "I understand, Marcus, but we have the truth on our side. That has to count for something." The conference room was stark and sterile, with a long wooden table dominating the space. At one end sat a panel of officers, their expressions unreadable. Detective Harris, the lead investigator for Internal Affairs, held a thick file in his hands. Across from the panel, Officer McLeod sat with his attorney. His confident demeanor from the night of the traffic stop was gone, replaced by a more subdued, almost nervous energy. "Elena," Marcus said as they took their seats at the opposite end of the table, "remember to stay calm. Let the evidence do the talking." Detective Harris cleared his throat and addressed the room. "We're here to review the formal complaint filed by Judge Elena Carter against Officer Daniel McLeod for misconduct during a traffic stop. We will review the evidence, including dashcam footage, and hear testimony from both parties." The lights dimmed, and the dashcam footage began to play on a large screen. Elena felt a knot form in her stomach as she watched the events unfold from a detached perspective. The video showed her car pulling over, McLeod's aggressive tone as he demanded her license and registration, and his unwarranted search of her vehicle. For the first time, Elena saw herself through the cold, objective lens of the camera. Her calm demeanor, McLeod's escalating behavior, the unease in her eyes as she stood by her car, trying to maintain her composure. When the footage ended, the room was silent. Detective Harris turned to Elena. "Judge Carter, would you like to make a statement?" Elena stood, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. "What you saw on that footage is not an isolated incident," she began. "It happens every day to countless black men and women, most of whom don't have the title or platform that I do. Officer McLeod's actions were not just an abuse of power. They were a reflection of a larger problem within the system. I wasn't pulled over because I broke the law. I was pulled over because I fit a profile. Because to Officer McLeod, a black woman driving a nice car at night was suspicious." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for accountability. Those who enforce the law must be held to the highest standard. Officer McLeod failed that standard." As she sat down, the panel remained silent, their faces unreadable. But Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her arm, a subtle gesture of support. McLeod's attorney rose to speak, launching into a carefully rehearsed defense. "Officer McLeod acted within the bounds of his authority," he argued. "The traffic stop was lawful, and the search was conducted out of concern for public safety. There is no evidence of racial profiling in this case." Elena clenched her jaw as the attorney continued, painting McLeod as a diligent officer who had been unfairly targeted by her complaint. But Marcus was ready. When it was his turn to cross-examine McLeod, Marcus wasted no time highlighting the inconsistencies in his testimony. "You claim the traffic stop was lawful," Marcus said, pacing in front of the panel. "Yet the dashcam footage shows no evidence of speeding or failure to stop at the intersection. Can you explain that, Officer McLeod?" McLeod shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I believe there was a violation at the time." "And when you searched Judge Carter's vehicle, what exactly were you looking for?" Marcus pressed. McLeod hesitated. "I was following protocol." "Protocol?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. Or were you hoping to find something, anything, that would justify your actions? The room was silent as Marcus returned to his seat, his questions hanging in the air. After hours of testimony and evidence presentation, the hearing concluded. Detective Harris announced that the panel would deliberate and issue their decision within the next few days. As Elena and Marcus left the building, the tension of the day still hung heavy in the air. "You were incredible in there," Marcus said as they reached the car. "You laid it all out, and they can't ignore the evidence." Elena nodded, though her mind was racing. "I hope you're right, Marcus, but I've seen how these things play out. The system protects its own." The drive home was quiet, each of them lost in their thoughts. When Elena arrived home, Lily was waiting in the living room, her face filled with nervous anticipation. "How did it go?" Lily asked, rising to her feet. Elena sighed, sinking into the couch. "It went as well as it could, but now we wait." Lily sat beside her, placing a comforting hand on her mother's shoulder. "Whatever happens, Mom, I'm proud of you. You're fighting for something bigger than yourself." Elena smiled at her daughter's words, a balm to her frayed nerves. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything to me." The wait for the panel's decision was agonizing. Elena tried to focus on her work at the courthouse, but the events of the hearing lingered in her mind. She knew the odds were against her. Police departments rarely held their own accountable in meaningful ways, but she refused to let doubt take hold. This fight wasn't just about her. It was about changing a system that had failed too many for too long. No matter the outcome of the hearing, Elena Carter wasn't going to stop. The days following the hearing were filled with tension. Judge Elena Carter carried herself with the same poise she always had, but inside the weight of anticipation was almost unbearable. Each hour that passed without a decision from the Internal Affairs panel felt like a clock ticking down to an uncertain outcome. Her phone buzzed constantly, calls from Marcus, messages of support from friends, and, increasingly, emails from strangers. Some were heartfelt, thanking her for standing up to the system. Others were hostile, questioning her integrity and accusing her of stirring unnecessary controversy. One morning, as Elena sat at her desk preparing for an upcoming case, her phone vibrated with a notification from a news outlet. She glanced at the headline, her stomach nodding immediately. "Prominent judge files complaint against police officer, community divided." Elena clicked the article and scanned its contents. It summarized the events of the traffic stop and the hearing, presenting a mostly neutral overview. However, the comments below the article paint a different picture. "She's just trying to make a name for herself," one user wrote. "Another example of someone playing the race card," read another. Elena sighed and closed the article. She had expected this. The backlash wasn't surprising, but it still stung. People didn't know her, didn't understand the gravity of what had happened, yet they were so quick to judge. Her thoughts were interrupted by a call from Marcus. "Elena," he began, his tone more urgent than usual. "I've been hearing from reporters. They're asking for your side of the story. I think it's time we talk about how you want to approach this." Elena leaned back in her chair, considering his words. "You think I should do another interview?" "Yes," Marcus replied without hesitation. "The narrative is already out there. If you don't speak up, others will define the story for you. This is your chance to take control." The idea of putting herself back in the spotlight wasn't appealing, but Elena knew Marcus was right. If she wanted to effect real change, she couldn't stay silent. That evening, as she sat in her living room with a notebook and pen, Lily joined her. "What are you working on?" Lily asked, sitting down beside her. "I'm thinking about what I want to say if I do another interview," Elena explained. "I need to make sure people understand why this fight matters." Lily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You're not just speaking for yourself, Mom. You're speaking for everyone who's ever been in your position and didn't have the power to fight back." Elena smiled, her daughter's words filling her with a renewed sense of purpose. "You're right, sweetheart. This isn't just about me." Over the next few days, Elena and Marcus prepared for the interview, crafting a message that was clear, honest, and impactful. Marcus also connected Elena with community leaders who wanted to lend their support. One of those leaders was Reverend Sarah Hughes, a prominent civil rights activist and pastor. Reverend Hughes had been following Elena's case closely and reached out to offer her solidarity. "Judge Carter," Reverend Hughes said during their first phone call, "your courage is inspiring. You're not just standing up for yourself. You're standing up for all of us." Elena was deeply moved by the Reverend's words. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of community, of not being alone in her fight. "Thank you, Reverend," Elena replied. "It's been a difficult journey, but knowing I have support like yours means the world to me." The following week, Elena sat down for her second interview. This time, she felt more prepared. The reporter, Naomi Fields, began by asking about the impact of the hearing and the public's response to her case. Elena chose her words carefully. "This isn't just about one traffic stop," she said. "It's about a system that has allowed these kinds of injustices to go unchecked for far too long. What happened to me is just one example of a much larger problem." Naomi leaned forward. "Do you believe this case could lead to meaningful change?" Elena nodded. "I believe it has to. If we don't demand accountability now, when will we? And who will be the next person to face this kind of treatment? It's time for all of us to say, enough is enough." The interview aired the next day, and the response was overwhelming. Social media was abuzz with conversations about Elena's case. For every negative comment, there were 10 more in support. "Judge Carter is a hero," one tweet read. "She's doing what so many of us are too afraid to do, calling out injustice." The momentum didn't stop there. Community leaders began organizing rallies and events to show solidarity with Elena and to raise awareness about racial profiling and police misconduct. Reverend Hughes spearheaded one of the largest rallies, inviting Elena to speak. The idea of speaking in front of hundreds, possibly thousands of people, was daunting. Elena was used to addressing courtrooms, but this was different. This was raw, public, and emotional. "Are you sure I'm the right person for this?" she asked Reverend Hughes during a planning meeting. "Absolutely," the Reverend replied. "Your voice carries weight, Judge Carter. People listen to you, and right now we need your voice more than ever." Elena spent the days leading up to the rally drafting and revising her speech. Lily offered to help, sitting with her late into the night as they worked through the message together. "You've got this, Mom," Lily said as Elena practiced her delivery. "Just speak from the heart." When the day of the rally arrived, the air was charged with energy. People of all ages and backgrounds gathered in the park, holding signs with messages like "Justice for All" and "End Racial Profiling." Elena stood behind the stage, her heart pounding as she looked out at the sea of faces. Reverend Hughes placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're ready," the Reverend said. Elena nodded step to the microphone. The crowd fell silent, their eyes fixed on her. "Thank you all for being here today," Elena began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm standing here not just as a judge or a black woman who experienced injustice, but as someone who believes that we all deserve better." The crowd erupted in applause, but Elena held up a hand to quiet them. "What happened to me wasn't unique," she continued. "It wasn't an isolated incident. It happens every day in cities and towns across this country. It happens to people without titles, without platforms, and without the means to fight back. But we're here today because we believe in something better. We're here because we refuse to accept the status quo. Together, we can demand change. Together, we can make a difference." The crowd cheered, their voices rising in unison. Elena felt a surge of emotion as she looked out at the sea of people who believed in the same fight she was waging. For the first time in weeks, she felt hopeful. This wasn't just her battle anymore. It was a movement. The rally was more than Elena Carter could have anticipated. As she stepped away from the microphone, the roar of the crowd reverberated through the park. For a moment, she simply stood there, taking it all in, the signs waving in the air, the chants for justice echoing through the streets, and the sheer number of people who had shown up to support her fight. Her daughter, Lily, was the first to reach her as she descended from the stage. Tears shimmered in Lily's eyes, but her expression was one of pride. "Mom, that was incredible," Lily said, throwing her arms around Elena. Elena hugged her daughter tightly, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her chest. "Thank you, sweetheart. I just hope it made a difference." Marcus Evans was next, clapping Elena on the back. "You've done something remarkable today," he said. This isn't just a rally. It's a statement. People are listening now. Elena nodded, her mind already racing. The rally was a success, but she knew it was just the beginning. Words alone wouldn't be enough to change a system so deeply entrenched in its ways. Action would have to follow. The days that followed the rally were a whirlwind of activity. News outlets picked up footage of Elena's speech, and it quickly went viral. Headlines ranged from glowing to divisive. Judge Elena Carter takes a stand against police misconduct. Is this the start of a new civil rights movement? Controversial judge sparks debate over policing in America. The responses on social media were equally polarized. Supporters praised Elena's courage and shared their own stories of injustice. Others accused her of vilifying law enforcement and fueling anti-police sentiment. Elena's inbox was flooded with emails, both supportive and hateful. Strangers reached out to thank her for speaking up, sharing how her bravery had inspired them. But there were also threats, anonymous messages warning her to stop, laced with slurs and veiled hostility. One email stood out. It was from a man named David, who wrote, "Judge Carter, I'm a retired police officer. I've seen firsthand how bias affects our system, and I want you to know that not all of us are against you. What you're doing takes courage, and I hope you don't let the negativity stop you. Change is long overdue." Reading David's words brought a lump to Elena's throat. Despite the overwhelming challenges, messages like his reminded her that the fight was worth it. As the rally's impact grew, so did the backlash from the police department. The police union issued a public statement condemning Elena's actions. Judge Carter's accusations undermine the integrity of our officers and erode public trust in law enforcement, the statement read. Her comments at the rally were inflammatory and divisive, creating an atmosphere of hostility toward those who serve and protect. Elena read the statement with a mixture of frustration and resignation. She had expected this. The union was doing exactly what Marcus had warned her they would, closing ranks to protect one of their own and discrediting her in the process. "They're trying to paint you as the enemy," Marcus said during a late-night phone call. "It's classic damage control. But we can use this to our advantage. The more they push back, the more it proves that you've struck a nerve." "I just wish it didn't have to come to this," Elena replied. "I didn't set out to vilify anyone. All I want is accountability." "And that's exactly why you're dangerous to them," Marcus said. "You're not just challenging McLeod, you're challenging the system. And they're scared." Despite the mounting pressure, Elena remained steadfast. With Marcus and Reverend Hughes by her side, she began working to turn the momentum from the rally into concrete action. One of their first steps was to organize a coalition of community leaders, activists, and legal professionals. The coalition's goal was to push for policy changes that would address systemic racism in policing and hold officers accountable for misconduct. The meetings were intense, often lasting late into the night. Elena found herself stepping into a new role, not just as a judge or a victim, but as a leader in a growing movement. During one meeting, Reverend Hughes spoke passionately about the need for collective action. "This isn't just about one officer or one complaint," the Reverend said. "This is about dismantling a system that has oppressed our communities for generations. We have the opportunity to create real change, but we have to do it together." Elena listened intently, her resolve strengthening with every word. The rally had shown her the power of unity, and now it was time to harness that power. As the coalition gained traction, Elena and Marcus turned their attention back to the internal affairs case. The hearing had concluded, but no decision had been announced yet. "We need to keep the pressure on," Marcus said during a strategy meeting. "The department is dragging its feet, hoping the public will lose interest. We can't let that happen." They decided to hold a press conference to highlight the delays and demand transparency. Standing in front of a cluster of cameras and reporters, Elena addressed the media with her signature poise. "It has been weeks since the internal affairs hearing, and we have yet to receive a decision," she said. "This lack of accountability is exactly why so many people have lost faith in the system. We demand answers, and we demand them now." The press conference made headlines, reigniting public interest in Elena's case. The pressure on the police department continued to mount, and whispers of reform began circulating within city leadership. Amid the chaos, Elena found moments of clarity and purpose. One evening, as she prepared for yet another interview, Lily joined her in the kitchen. "You're really making a difference, Mom," Lily said, handing her a cup of tea. "People are starting to see what you've been fighting for." Elena smiled, grateful for her daughter's unwavering support. "I just hope it's enough," she said. "There's still so much work to be done." Lily placed a hand on her mother's shoulder. "It is enough, because you're showing people that change is possible, and that's more than most can say." As Elena sipped her tea, she thought about the journey so far, the challenges, the victories, and the long road still ahead. She wasn't naive. She knew the fight was far from over. But for the first time, she felt a sense of hope. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. The days stretched into weeks, and the internal affairs decision continued to loom over Judge Elena Carter's life. The rally, the interviews, and the press conference had brought attention to her cause, but the lack of closure from the hearing left a shadow over her efforts. Elena had spent her career believing in the justice system, trusting in its ability to uphold fairness and accountability. Now, as she waited for the outcome of her complaint against Officer McLeod, she wrestled with a question she had never thought she'd ask. Could the system truly reform itself? One afternoon, as Elena sat in her office reviewing case files, her phone buzzed with a call from Marcus. "They've made their decision," Marcus said, his tone serious. "They want to meet with us first, before announcing it publicly." Elena's stomach tightened. This wasn't standard procedure. "What do you think that means?" "It could go either way," Marcus replied, "but we need to be prepared for anything." The meeting was scheduled for the following morning. As Elena prepared, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was a pivotal moment, not just for her, but for the movement that had grown around her fight. The conference room at the Internal Affairs office was as stark as ever, the same place where Elena had testified weeks earlier. Detective Harris and Captain Wright, one of the department's highest-ranking officers, sat across the table from Elena and Marcus. "Judge Carter, Mr. Evans," Captain Wright began, her tone formal. "Thank you for meeting with us. We've concluded our investigation into Officer McLeod's conduct during the traffic stop." Elena leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Detective Harris cleared his throat, consulting the thick file in front of him. "After reviewing the dashcam footage, conducting interviews, and evaluating all evidence, we have determined that Officer McLeod's actions were inappropriate and a violation of departmental policy." Relief washed over Elena, but it was fleeting. She knew there was more to come. "However," Harris continued, "we've also determined that his conduct does not rise to the level of criminal misconduct. As a result, Officer McLeod will face internal disciplinary measures, including a suspension without pay and mandatory retraining." Elena felt her heart sink. Suspension? Retraining? That was it? Her voice was calm but edged with frustration as she spoke. "With all due respect, how is that an adequate response? This isn't just about one traffic stop. It's about a pattern of behavior, a systemic issue that allows officers like McLeod to act without accountability." Captain Wright's expression remained neutral. "We understand your concerns, Judge Carter, and we believe this decision is a step toward addressing those issues." Elena's jaw tightened. A step. It was always just a step, never enough to create real change. Marcus interjected, his tone measured but firm. "Judge Carter has been fighting for more than a slap on the wrist. This decision sends the message that misconduct will be tolerated as long as it doesn't cross an arbitrary line." "We acknowledge the gravity of the situation," Wright said, her voice carefully controlled. "And we encourage you to continue working with us to improve our policies." Elena stood, her posture resolute. "Thank you for your time, Captain Wright, Detective Harris. But let me be clear, this fight isn't over." As Elena and Marcus left the building, the weight of the decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. They had secured a small victory, acknowledgement of McLeod's misconduct, but it wasn't enough. In the car, Marcus sighed, leaning back in his seat. "It's not surprising, but it's disappointing." Elena stared out the window, her mind racing. The system did exactly what it was designed to do, protect itself. But we can't let this end here. "We won't," Marcus said. "You've already built something bigger than this case. The rally, the coalition, the public support. That's where the real change will come from." That evening, Elena sat at her desk, staring at the stacks of notes and documents related to her case. Lily entered the room with a cup of tea, placing it gently on the desk. "How are you feeling?" Lily asked softly. Elena shook her head, a small, wry smile on her lips. "Frustrated, but determined. This isn't the outcome I wanted, but it's not the end." Lily sat across from her mother, her expression serious. "You've done more than anyone could have expected, Mom. You've inspired so many people. That matters." Elena reached across the desk, taking her daughter's hand. "Thank you, sweetheart. Your support means everything to me." Over the next few days, Elena refocused her efforts on the broader movement. The decision in McLeod's case was a setback, but it also underscored the need for systemic change. The coalition, now bolstered by the rally's success, began drafting proposals for police reform. These included mandatory body cameras, independent oversight committees, and stricter accountability measures for officers found guilty of misconduct. Elena used her platform to amplify these efforts. She wrote op-eds for major newspapers detailing her experience and calling for actionable change. She spoke at universities and community forums, sharing her story and urging others to join the fight. The threats and backlash continued, but Elena refused to be silenced. One evening, she received a call from Reverend Hughes. "Elena," the Reverend said, her voice warm, "I wanted to let you know that we're organizing another rally next month. This time, we're focusing on the reforms your coalition has proposed. We'd love for you to speak again." Elena hesitated. The first rally had been an emotional whirlwind, and the idea of stepping back into the public spotlight was daunting. But she knew this was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. "I'll be there," she said firmly. The second rally was even larger than the first. Thousands gathered in the city square, holding signs and chanting for justice. When Elena took the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. She felt the familiar rush of nerves, but quickly steadied herself. "Thank you for being here today," she began. "This movement isn't about me. It's about all of us. It's about creating a future where no one has to experience what I did. A future where accountability isn't optional and justice isn't conditional." The crowd cheered, their voices rising in unison. Elena felt a swell of emotion as she looked out at the sea of faces, united in their demand for change. As she stepped away from the microphone, Reverend Hughes met her with a warm smile. "You're doing something incredible, Elena. You've given people hope." Elena nodded, her resolve stronger than ever, and we're just getting started. In the weeks that followed, the coalition's efforts gained traction. City officials began discussing the proposed reforms, and media outlets continued to highlight Elena's case. The fight was far from over, but Elena knew they were making progress. For every obstacle they faced, there was a growing sense of momentum, a belief that change was possible. One evening, as Elena sat at her desk, Lily walked in and placed a hand on her mother's shoulder. "You're going to change things, Mom," Lily said, her voice filled with certainty. "I know you are," Elena nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude and determination. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." As she sipped her tea, Elena reflected on the journey so far. The battle had been grueling, and the road ahead would be long. But she was ready, because this fight for justice was one she couldn't afford to lose. The story of Judge Elena Carter isn't just a narrative about a single traffic stop. It's a reflection of a much larger reality. It reminds us that even those at the highest levels of achievement and influence are not immune to systemic injustices. Elena's journey is a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of speaking truth to power, and the unyielding hope for a better future. Through her courage, we see the value of standing up, even when the odds seem insurmountable. She didn't just fight for herself, she fought for those who couldn't, for those whose voices had been silenced by fear or despair. Elena's story shows us that change is never easy and victories are rarely immediate, but every small step forward is a step toward justice. Her journey is a call to action, not just to address the injustices we see, but to challenge the systems that allow them to persist. It's a reminder that the fight for fairness and accountability requires collective effort, unwavering determination, and the courage to face criticism and adversity. As the story concludes, we're left with a powerful question. What will we do to carry this momentum forward? How can we, in our own ways, contribute to creating a world where justice isn't just a promise, but a reality for everyone? If this story resonates with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Did it inspire you? Did it spark new perspectives? Let us know in the comments below. Here's something fun. If you found Elena's story compelling, drop a 1 in the comments. If you thought it was incredibly moving and powerful, comment 2. And don't stop there. Share your own stories. Have you ever faced a challenge where you had to stand up for what was right? Your voice matters, and we'd love to hear about your experiences. Lastly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more inspiring stories like this one. Share your thoughts below and join the conversation. Together, we can turn stories into action and inspire real change. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.